This is Matthew Cossolotto. I want to welcome all my listeners to another installment of What's Your Promise? And this show is all about encouraging and inspiring and informing people about how to make promises, encouraging them to make promises and keep their word. And I just want to start off, as I usually do, with the four-sentence mantra that I like to talk about. Make a promise, keep your word, change your life, transform the world. That's what it's about. That's what all of this is about. And for those of you who've not heard this show before, I just want to say a couple of quick words. Again, my name is Matthew Cossolotto, and I made a promise to my mother on her deathbed that I would finish writing a book and dedicate it to her memory. And in the process of keeping my word on that promise, a heartfelt promise, one of these things you know failure is not an option once you make a promise like that. In the process of keeping my word on that promise, it has occurred to me that there's a much bigger story here. It's not just about me keeping my word, which I think is important. It's about inspiring others to tap into this unique power that we all have access to, this unique power to make a promise, keep a word, change our lives, and transform the world. So that's my mission. That's my vision of what I'm doing now, and I'm developing a book called The Power of Making a Promise. Some of you already know that Jack Canfield will be doing the foreword to that book, and I have a nice story from John Assaraf to include. He's told me about a promise he made in his life, so that'll be included in the book. And what we do with this particular show, What's Your Promise, is we have guests come on, talk about promises that they've made in their own lives that have transformed their lives in some way, that have they've been life-changing, powerful promises that they've made. And so we're going to have a guest today, and I'll get to Roslyn Franken in just a minute, and I appreciate her being patient. My guests come on and they listen to me for a little bit, but I like to just set the stage a little bit before we get into the promise that our guests talk about. And one of the things I want to mention today is kind of a new thought that I've had as I develop this book and talk to people about this particular power of making a promise. And the new thought has to do with what the benefits are to people who take on this challenge. I sometimes talk about the promise challenge. And one of the benefits is that you will achieve more. And I'll just say the three things quickly. Achieve more, believe more, and receive more. Those are the three things I think that people will get out of taking the promise challenge. And so you achieve more. You reach your goals in a more effective and more powerful way through making a promise. And you'll believe more in your ability to do that because you will have seen that you reach your goals and you achieve more in your life. And that's a good thing, so you achieve more. But you also receive more. And I think that's important. Not that receiving is the be-all, end-all, but I think a lot of people have trouble receiving the benefits. So they have trouble receiving what they want in their lives. And so I believe that this is important. Achieve more, believe more, and receive more. And I'm going to actually be talking more about what I'm calling the power or the art of receiving in our lives. And I think Roslyn might actually want to speak to that a little bit. And we're going to have a conversation. There's not going to be a monologue from me about all of this. But I just wanted to set the stage with that new thought about achieve more, believe more, and receive more in your lives. I'll tell you a little something about Roslyn, and then we'll ask her about what's her promise on the show. We'll ask her about that and ask a few questions about her promise. But Roslyn is a cancer survivor, and she has triumphed over her own battles with issues about weight and lifestyle and food, and so she's somebody who speaks from her own personal experience about overcoming obstacles. And she does have a book called The A-List. I just want to mention that the A-List, subtitled as 9 Guiding Principles for Healthy Eating and Positive Living. I just want to mention also that I like her little tagline is bringing positive change to life. So I like that. That's got a nice ring to it. So she's an author. She's a cancer survivor. She helps and motivates other people, particularly around the area of weight loss, and promoting a more positive lifestyle. And as I mentioned, she's the host of How to Thrive After 35 Talk Radio, and she's also a co-author of a book called Death Can Wait, Stories from Cancer Survivors. So we have today a guest who's going to speak to a particular promise that she made, and then also can speak to some of these broader issues of just changing your lives for the better. And so let me welcome Roslyn Franken to the show. Roslyn, are you there?
I am here. Great to be here.
Excellent. So Roslyn's here, and so I've got to pose the question to you, and I like to do this in the same way each time. Roslyn Franken, what's your promise? Can you tell us about it?
I would love to tell you my promise. I made a promise in March of 2004. I made a very, very big promise that I made that happened to me. I was about 39 years old at the time, almost turning 40, and I literally got on the scale one day and saw that I was at my heaviest weight ever.
Right.
And I stood there thinking to myself, my God, I had cancer 10 years ago. 10 years prior to that, I survived cancer. I got through a lot of obstacles in those 10 years. And there I stood and said, how can I have let this happen? What am I doing to myself? How much more weight do I need to gain? How much worse do I have to feel about myself? What else needs to happen to kick myself into action? And my mother had passed away from cancer just a few months before. My dad, I've got heart disease on my dad's side of the family, and I just stood there thinking, my God, I'm a smart person. I'm a good person. I should know better. I should know better. And I just made a decision, and I believe that when you talk about making a promise, it all starts with a decision, right? A promise is a decision. And for me, it was getting on the scale that day and seeing that number staring back at me until I was just in total disbelief, and I said, that's it. And I made the decision to say enough is enough, and making that promise that, you know what, I am going to start today. As of today, I am going to start taking better care of me. I am going to do what I need to do to lose this weight and keep it off in a safe, sensible, sustainable way, and really had to take stock. So with that promise, with that decision, I had to take a step back and say, okay, how am I going to turn this promise into reality? Right? So that, like you said, you don't want to end up feeling like a failure, that you've set a goal and feel like a failure. No, this is a lifelong promise. And with that promise and that decision comes commitment. And I made the commitment to say, what is it in my past that has caused me to gain this weight? What is it that has caused me for so many years to, go on and off diets? I had tried everything. What was it? Why did none of it work? And it didn't work because I didn't make the promise for the long term. I was focused on just losing the weight fast and easy like everybody else, right? We look into that new diet, the magic solution. We look for what's the fastest, easiest way to reach my goal? And it doesn't work long term. And that just doesn't pertain to weight. I think many things in life. I think, anybody listening, if, you're in business for yourself, we get caught up in everybody's got the fastest, easiest solution. All you have to do is this, and you're going to be successful. All you got to do is that. And you're trying all these things because you think that's what you have to do. But, not everything works. And it comes back down to what is the ultimate promise? What is the ultimate commitment? What is it that you need to do that is sustainable long-term, that is going to actually get you the actual results that you really desire and deserve? That's a big part of it. So when you make that promise to yourself, it's actually feeling worthy and deserving of keeping that promise as well. So that's the big promise that I made.
That's the big promise. And let's do sort of what I call the anatomy of a promise. Let's look at this a little bit more. You mentioned the standing on the scales, which sometimes these promises, these commitments come out of, kind of like the horror of realizing what the heck, what am I doing to myself? And sometimes that comes from that. And then you make a promise to yourself. And it sounds like this was a promise to yourself originally that you're going to change, and it's for the long term. And so in your own mind, I just want to maybe have you verbalize this. This was initially, maybe over a period of time, was just a promise that you had to yourself. But then, as I understand it, you began to share the promise with other people. And so it wasn't just to yourself, but it started out that way. Is that accurate?
That's very accurate. It started off to myself to the point where I didn't tell anybody at first, because I thought, when you make a promise to yourself and then you start telling people, there's also a little bit of sense of accountability, because now all of a sudden people are going to start asking you, how's it going with that promise, or how's it going, where are you at? And at first I didn't want anybody knowing, because I didn't want anybody checking up on me, or just for the risk of like, well, what happens if I don't follow through? Then I'm going to, feel bad. It's bad enough that I'm going to feel bad for myself, but now having to say that to other people makes it even worse. But I thought, as I started doing it and I started getting results and I started feeling good, really good about the promise, then I started telling people. I didn't go around telling everybody, hey, I'm, losing weight. And it also, in my case, became obvious because people could see it visually, right? So they could see that I was making a change for myself, because it was something that you can see on the outside. But what was happening in my case was not just an external promise of I want to look better on the outside. This was when you make a promise like this or anything, it's really it's an inside job, right?
It's an inside job. That's one of my taglines. Success is an inside job. I use that.
Absolutely.
I use that.
And so
some of my programs.
It really is. And so I did start telling people, and people obviously started noticing. And something you said earlier, you said, what were the three things you said? You said achieve,
more,
believe,
and receive.
Yeah. Okay. So making the promise definitely helped me achieve more, believe more, and receive more. Let me tell you that when I started out with this promise, it was not even on the radar that I would be writing a book about this, that I would be helping other people make the same promise to themselves and follow through, that I would be coaching people, that I would be standing on stages and, talking about this and motivating other people. So just to say that when you say achieve more, believe more, and receive more, I mean, this one promise that I made to myself was a kickstart to I would say, a whole new career path, a whole new passion, a whole new drive. And, you just don't know where that promise is going to take you when you follow through on it, because what you learn about yourself in the process is enormous. So I have a weight loss coaching program that I offer, and it's all by telephone and email, and people can find out about it at my website for that program is the AListWeightLossProgram.com. So it's THEALIST, the A-List, weightlossprogram.com. There's a free readiness assessment you could take on the Internet, and followed by a brief phone call just to go through it and see, are you ready? You ready to make the promise? Well, then let's do it. Let's work together. Let's get you there so that you could feel better than you've ever felt before. It really doesn't just change your body. It transforms your life, absolutely. And from the website, you can order my book. I have a free newsletter that I send out, and when you sign up for the newsletter, you get a free report called 6 Secrets for Less Stress. because stress is such a culprit in this society that we live in. People are so stressed these days. So finding a better way to manage stress and manage your life is only going to help you in every area of your life. Absolutely. So lots of information there, and people can call me too. Just any questions you have, I'd love to be able to help and to answer questions and get you on board to making the promise of your life.
Do you, so on your website they can contact you with an email, you have phone numbers and all that. We don't need to do it on the show here, but you people can go to the website and get all of the contact information to get in touch with Roslyn, help with this transformation. It really is all about transformation and change and achieving more. And so, and I think that's really a critical part. And something about, it's the internal, we talked about the inside job, and I'll just kind of reinforce that. It's really the inside promise. It's the change in the mentality or the brain waves or something that maybe John Assaraf knows more about than I do. But there's something about a promise, and I use that phrase once in a while. And what is your thought about that, Roslyn? About the fact that this is not really being talked about all that much. It's kind of you can go through any self-help book and you just don't see promises talked about. But I want to change that.
Maybe because, when you think of the word goals, to me goals and objectives, it sounds very business-like, doesn't it? It sounds very, it's so, you have to also look maybe at who's writing these materials. Where is it coming from? If they're equating life to business, then you're not going to have that heart center aspect to it, right? That emotional connection doesn't come into play as much because it's about achieving goals. It's about meeting objectives. It's about setting numbers to things and saying, I must achieve this by such and such a date. And what you're saying defies that because, most people don't live in their heartfelt things that they want to do. It's not a matter of business. Life is a business, I suppose, but you're looking at it from a more heartfelt way.
Before I close out, Roslyn, any last word that you want to share with people? And then I'm going to do kind of a quick wrap-up, and then we'll sign off. But any final thoughts?
Just all I could say is seize the moment. If something you've heard on this show today has got you thinking, has got you revved up to make a promise, make it, write it down on one. Make one promise today. That's
exactly.
all
That's
you
a good
need
point.
to do.
One promise starts out, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single promise, just one promise that you're going to take one more step. And it could be weight loss. It could be some other thing that you want to do. Or, I always like to remind people, how did Tolstoy write War and Peace? Huge book and, massive. One word at a time, folks. It's one word. That's anybody. Mozart. How did he write his great works, his musical masterpieces? One note at a time. He didn't do it all at once.
Exactly.
It's always one step at a time. And that's the thing, that's the inspiration, one promise at a time, and we can actually change our lives. And I'll just kind of wrap up with this, my mantra that I like to remind people: make a promise, keep your word, change your life, and transform the world. That's what this is all about. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Roslyn, for being my guest. And get out there, make a promise, change your lives, everybody. And transform the world. Thanks for listening. Bye now.